I'm able to do it now. So here, I'm going to read something first, and I'm sorry I did have to turn my light off so I could plug my mouse back in. So forgive me for being a little darker here, but so here is Mark's account of the baptism of Jesus. John the Baptizer appeared in the wilderness, proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. And people from the whole Judean countryside and all the people of Jerusalem were going out to him and were baptized by him in the river Jordan, confessing their sins. Now John was clothed with camel's hair, with a leather belt around his waist, and he ate locusts and wild honey. He proclaimed, "The one who is more powerful than I is coming after me. I am not worthy to stoop down and untie the thong of his sandals. I have baptized you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit." In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the Beloved. With you I am well pleased." That's the reading we get on First Epiphany. And here is the first picture I have selected. Guessing everybody can see it.
Yes.
Good.
Very
All
nice.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
She's so busy.
So we have a lot going on in this one, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gee.
And if you look at it, the first thing that jumps out at me is the fact that there's no depth to the river.
They're not in there up to their ankles.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's a puddle on the ground.
Jim just said they're walking on water.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, well, I suppose it could, although, and John's on a rock, so.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they still didn't get depth yet in perspective. So the river being a puddle can be forgiven.
And of course, I think we could say the point of this is not the depth of the river or how deep Jesus was in the water, is the fact that he was baptized.
Yeah, sure.
The artist had the right idea. He just kind of conveyed it in a different way.
And these must be tributaries here that are coming out from the puddle.
Yes.
So what are the buildings in the background?
Yeah. Is it church? No.
It's hard to say. This looks like it might resemble the temple, but this looks more like a modern day church.
Well, given the costuming, it's about 14th century Italian.
Right, yeah, definitely Italian.
So you could be looking at one of the baptismals next to the church.
Yeah.
That would be the white. That would be the white tower with the blue roof.
This here. Oh, this.
Over in the left.
Next to it. That one.
Oh, this.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But remember, and for those of you who weren't part of this, I apologize. But remember when we were doing the meditations in Advent, and we had one of these on John the Baptist, and it had up in the corner what looked to be a tomb. This kind of looks tomby to me here.
It does.
Doesn't have a hair?
But this time, Jesus is definitely, you know who Jesus is.
Yes.
And the headless cherubs, or excuse me, the bodiless cherubs. And God speaking.
And the dove.
Somebody
The dove.
way over to the left, upper left, and people are looking up at that person. Does that person have a halo?
Does.
Yeah. Also on the
right, too.
right too.
There's a halo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one on each side. And they both have God.
And they're looking at that person too.
Uh-huh.
So I'm wondering, in this case,
It looks like it's just another figure of Jesus in a different time.
That's a halo, people.
unless this is like 3 phases of John the Baptist ministry, could this be John the Baptist preaching? Because that one painting we looked at almost seemed to have the very people in it that we see here.
Yeah.
It could be the same artist. Where this is John baptizing Jesus, and this could be John preaching at another time. I mean, I don't know.
Well, he's not in his camel cloak.
No, he's not. But it could also be in John's gospel where we're told that disciples of John the Baptist are there and then come to Jesus. These could be disciples of John the Baptist
Okay,
doing some of his work while this is going on.
okay.
I find it interesting that John has that same staff with the cross on top of it that he did in a couple of the other paintings that we looked at earlier.
And that seems to be a standard depiction of John in a lot of artwork we see is
Okay.
that staff. Yeah.
Mm.
And remember, sometimes you get the ribbon on it that says, behold the Lamb of God.
Mm.
Ecce Agnus Dei, I guess.
What is John holding in his right hand?
Wait.
Is that
This-
a shell?
I'm
Yes.
guessing it's a shell,
Okay.
which is another funny thing considering, yeah, that may just be a bowl.
A bowl, because the water's not too deep.
Yeah, some of them I've seen a shell and it's like, well, that looks like a shell that might have come out of the sea and not out of the Jordan.
Mhm.
But maybe that's what John used. I don't know.
Mhm.
But that looks like a bowl. And this is clearly someone either getting ready to be baptized or just finished.
Right.
And this is someone who doesn't look like they want to be there.
Maybe a teenager.
Yeah, my mom made me do this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect teenage response there.
Yeah.
Have any of you been baptized in the Jordan River?
No,
No?
My son and I were when I lived in Germany for 10 years. Our church went over there on several trips, and of course we had to be baptized.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In the spot that they believe was where it happened. Yeah.
Yes, and they have the railing out there so you can hang on, and because the river can get swift, but it was a wonderful thing. And then we took a ride across the Sea of Galilee, of course.
Mm,
That'd be great.
mm,
A lot of history there. Need a whole month or two.
mhm.
I have a little rock that's from the Jordan River that I use when I do baptisms. I put it in the font.
Oh,
That's
neat.
nice.
That's not something I gathered myself. It was it was given to my father early in his ministry from someone who was in Israel and got it.
no.
And he used it and then he passed it on to me.
That was
And
nice.
somehow in my collection, I ended up with a bottle of water from the Jordan. It's got, the old, what are the old labeling machines with the blue tape that you would punch
Oh,
the
yeah.
letters on?
Oh, yeah. Label,
yeah.
label.
A label
I'm-
maker. It's
I'm
got
a-
a black label on it that says Jordan River 1974 or something like that. And I'm very afraid to open it. So that it
And
might
how
just dry out.
how
Yeah.
do you really know it's from the Jordan? How do you?
You have to believe, you have to be a believer.
Okay.
It was, I don't remember how I ended up with it. Someone told me it had been given to them or they
Yeah.
collected it maybe. I don't know. I believed them. I still have it. It sits on my shelf. That's about all it does.
Yeah, don't open it.
All right. So there's that. Let's look at another one.
Okay.
Jeff, you're awfully quiet tonight.
Yeah. Is he there?
On mute.
He's on, is he?
Yeah, I think you're muted out, Jeff.
That's why he's so quiet.
Uh,
How about now?
there you
Yeah.
go. I'm used to you chiming in on some of these things. And I
I'm
wasn't
trying out a
hearing you.
different device, but I'm also keeping quiet. I was just going to mention that either speaker on the other side of that painting both have halos, but they're clearly not John the Baptist. So it is. I think you're right. It could be a couple of disciples of his, or yeah.
Yes, we
Okay,
don't know
so-
the artist's intention.
Right. So here's the next one. Little, very different style.
Oh. Oh, wait. Yeah, what?
And John, here you have a little more river, although they're barely in the water at all.
And he is using a shell there.
Yeah, he's got a shell there. It's interesting to me that there's no people. You don't see the people there. And this was obviously in a public setting.
And I don't see a dove, I don't think.
Yeah. right there.
Is there one?
Yeah, there's a dove right there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And God,
Yeah.
assuming, I'm presuming that's to be God.
And cherubs.
Yeah.
A sweet painting, very sweet.
And John in the camel's hair. But Jesus, I mean, there's nothing distinguishing about Jesus other than that said this is, I mean, that could be anybody that, well, obviously with God and the dove and the cherubs, you know it's Jesus, but nothing else distinguishing it to be Jesus.
Yeah. Just
And-
looks like a young white guy. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and very white.
very
Yes.
yeah. Side. Right.
Although
Well,
John
God-
looks a little darker, but
He's dark, yeah. Well, he's a little rough, you know,
He's been outdoors a lot.
yeah,
lives in the woods.
he's out with the bees and the honey. And
I think God looks kind of Scandinavian, right?
God looks short.
Short, yeah. Yeah.
I presume these were 3 different artists.
Yeah, and that's the thing, when you just do an internet search, it's hard to find
Mm.
the artist necessarily. And I promised you I'd get you artist names, and I don't have those yet.
Well, the first one was Pietro Perugino.
There you go. Jeff's good at finding this stuff.
Pietro Carradino.
So is Rick right about the 14th century?
Roughly, yeah. And it's interesting that now, as I've just read on about that painting, it was John the Baptist on one side and Jesus on the other, both preaching.
So it is a storyboard kind of.
oh,
Yeah, it was, well, Jesus on one side and John the Baptist on the other. Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's quite an explanation of it in Wikipedia. He was quite an important painter.
All right, let's look at the third. Now, the third one is actually from a church. It's like a painting within, like on the wall of the church itself, inside. Probably in their baptistry, would be my guess. Let me pull it up a little bit. Okay.
Hey, ooh, yeah. Wow.
So because you can see it, here's a cross and candles. There's probably an altar down here, and there's probably a font right in front of it. Would be my guess.
At least he's in the water. It's almost up to his knees.
Yeah, there's a little more depth.
Yeah,
And it looks like this could be, or maybe that's just rocks down there.
yeah,
Nice.
like it's,
But here we don't get God and the cherubs. We do get, I'm guessing, heavens open somewhat up here, but it's even hard to tell that unless that's the opening. But I don't see a dove.
Mhm. Maybe it is God. Looks like it.
And John's got kind of, 50s hair.
Yeah, it has a mullet.
Mullet.
The artists have fun.
The two people with the towels
Where?
in front,
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
that was mentioned in the description of the very first painting, and I didn't notice it in the first painting, but it was described that there were young people in the foreground of the main painting, and they both had towels, and that was influenced by other painters who had made certain that there were people in the painting with towels.
Yeah, I think one of those we decided was someone who had just been baptized and was probably toweling off. It's, this one's interesting. Well,
But
it
is one towel red and the other clearly a different color?
looks blue.
Ooh,
So one is royal for John the Baptist and the other is red for Jesus.
the other way around.
And
Well,
he's
except
full
that
of-
Jesus is always red for the crucifixion and the blood.
Why is blue?
That looks like a brown towel to me.
It
Yeah.
does look brown.
But on first glance, this guy almost looks like he's holding the towel out for Jesus,
Uh-huh.
like he's going to offer it to Jesus. And this guy, I couldn't figure out, is just scrubbing his arms.
Maybe
I
he's
guess
trying
he's
to
drying
dry.
off. Yeah.
Right.
Just using the towel to flex.
Another interesting thing I noticed in almost anyone I look at is Jesus has his arms crossed over his chest.
Yeah.
And I know that whenever I've seen a baptism done by immersion, where they put the person completely under the water,
Yeah.
the person would tend to stand like that, so it's easier when they get pushed back under the water. But in most of the pictures you see of Jesus is simply standing in the water, having water poured over him, and so I never understand why the arms are crossed.
That just seems like a very humbling position to
Yeah,
me.
I'm guessing
Yeah.
that's probably what it is.
Just, I mean, kind of caught up in the moment.
Yes.
In reverence, maybe.
Yeah.
Water's cold.
Yeah, but if you come to the altar and don't want to take the wine, that's what you're told to do, is to cross your arms.
Right, so they skip you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's interesting.
he's not getting skipped here. He's getting baptized.
That's true.
He says, "Let this pass, this cold water."
The humility of it all.
That'll come up later.
Yes, it will. So but let's go back now, Jeff, that you mentioned that. And I'm going to pull up that first one again.
I read that the first painter, he was actually a teacher of Raphael.
Oh,
So
Really?
he's very important.
so this is the one we talked about with the towel in
Yeah,
the foreground. And here's someone holding a towel, or I'm guessing, unless that's a robe.
Yeah, so in the description, and I don't have it open now, but in the description, it just said that those children there to the right of Jesus, to the left, Jesus is right, our left. That was echoing from some famous Flemish painters that were famous for painting this scene also at the same time. So
Okay.
as we're seeing with these famous paintings, there are always these references to other artists or other styles or maybe contemporary people. As Rick said, that building in the background, you just can't he had to have placed that. That must be well known to the people who saw this
Right.
painting in the current day.
You see that a lot in architecture too, don't you? Where buildings will have little
Right.
notches in them or things done on them to pay honor or respect to another builder or another building.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to give credit to a bygone era or bygone city or bygone people, so they just put everything in.
Let's see.
It's interesting that artists do this, borrow ideas from others. That happens in music all the time too.
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
They steal. The Baroque
Yep.
period in particular, they love to steal from each other.
yeah.
So here's some people who look like they're preparing for baptism or have come out, who have towels, or unless that's just their cloths like Jesus's.
Back in that day, I wonder how towels differed from robes. I wonder what they were made of.
Mm-hmm. Other than terry cloth.
Man, did they have terry cloth? Oh, yeah.
I don't think so.
Didn't have monograms on.
Oh, no.
They didn't know about a come to Jesus moment yet, or is that part of our generation?
Ours.
Come to Jesus moment.
Mm-hmm.
I would say if any towels from that era probably would have been an old cloak or an old piece of fabric that used to be a garment.
Sure.
Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Garments to towels. Yeah, I can I can see that.
Mhm.
All right. So now I do have some other pictures to go with what I discovered today. So let me get these ready. This past Sunday, wait a minute. Jeff, help me out here. It is healing Peter's mother-in-law this coming Sunday, or was that last Sunday?
This coming Sunday.
That's this coming Sunday. Okay. So this past Sunday, what did we do? We did, the teaching in the temple and the exorcising the demon from
Right. The first
man with unclean spirit.
first
Okay.
exorcism. Yeah.
Unclean spirits. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go here first. I don't have comparisons here. I just found a picture that I thought I liked.
Yeah. Last Sunday was when they went to Capernaum.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and they're still in Capernaum
Sure,
for this
right.
Sunday, but
Right.
so here's what I found on Jesus casting out the demon from the man with the unclean spirit.
Wow.
And what's interesting about this is you can tell it's a synagogue. Here are the scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
The dress is such as would be in a synagogue. And then Jesus is casting out the demon here, but what you don't see is anything coming out from the man. Other pictures I saw actually have spirits or whatnot coming out. So we're in year B. And what we've had so far in Epiphany in terms of our readings, we've had a lot about prophetic calls. We've had a lot about calls of the disciples. There's a little bit of Moses and the prophets thrown in there. And then healing or restoring someone back to community. So I started to look then at the other years. So we're in Mark's gospel in year B. We're in Matthew in year A. We're in Luke in year C. To see how similar the lectionary is. And in particular, I was looking to see, the story of Jesus exorcising the demons from the man with the unclean spirit, if we get that same story in Matthew or Luke at a similar time. So that was my premise to start this. And here's what I found out, and it's kind of neat. And some of you may have already done this, or you may remember it. We know that and I only went through 5 Epiphany because that's all we have this year. First Epiphany, the first Sunday after the Epiphany, is the gospel will always be the baptism of Jesus. We know that. And so we get it in the various stories. So in A, it's Matthew, B, it's Mark, which we have this year, and C, it's Luke. The other thing you get is the Old Testament tends to be something that establishes authority or laying out how things will be, right? So we have in year A, one of the servant songs out of Isaiah, which within the context of Isaiah speaks to Israel, within a Christian context points to Jesus in a lot of ways. So it's a setting up of what this servant will be. In year B, we get creation. So it's a setting up of authority from God in creating the world. In Luke, we get another servant song out of Isaiah. So they all have similar things. The New Testament reading in all 3 years is from Acts on that first Sunday after Epiphany. So what that says to me is how the apostles are responding through the power of their own baptism to go out and do these works in the world, right? And then, of course, we have the gospel accounts of the baptism of Jesus. Then we move into second Epiphany. And here's the thing that I found really interesting is we go through 5 Epiphany in all 3 years. The New Testament reading is always from 1 Corinthians. So we get Paul in the same book, in the same letter, all 3 years. And that's obviously teaching and trying to respond. Remember, 1 Corinthians is Paul's response to whatever questions they asked him. But I guess I didn't realize that all 3 years, it's all from 1 Corinthians, from Second Epiphany on. And then as the gospel goes, in year A, we get John's version of the first disciples being called. In Mark year B, we get another portion of John's version of the first disciples being called. And in year C, we get John's version of the wedding, or we get John's account of the wedding at Cana to sort of fill out that third manifestation of the Epiphany.
Which is the only account of the Cana.
Which is the only account. John's the only one to write about that, right? And then in the third week of Epiphany, we get 1 Corinthians. We get the synoptic version of the first disciples being called in year A and year B, but in year C, we get Jesus reading Isaiah from the scroll in the synagogue, which in a way is a calling too, because remember, he puts the scroll down and he says, today this has been fulfilled in your hearing.
Yeah.
So it's just very similar. And in the Old Testament, on that third Sunday, 3 Epiphany, in year A, we get a repeat of Isaiah's reading that we get at Christmas. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light, which then gets said again in Matthew's gospel for that day. In year B, we get a prophetic call of a prophet. In year C, we get the law of Moses. So we're dwelling in these prophets and the law. That's a common theme. As we move forward to 4 Epiphany, all 3 years, prophets, Moses, prophets, prophetic call, Moses, the law and prophets continues. 1 Corinthians continues. And then we get, in year A, we get Jesus teaching the disciples. In year B, we get Jesus exorcising demons and healing. And in year C, we get fulfilling the law and teaching the people. So teaching disciples, healing, teaching the people. And in the healing is also sort of a form of teaching as well. That's in 4. In 5 Epiphany, we go back to in the Old Testament restoration. Isaiah's, the restoration of Israel. We get that in A and B, and in C we get another prophetic call, which also relates to restoration. We get 1 Corinthians, and then we get more teaching. Jesus teaching about salt in Matthew's gospel. Jesus healing in Mark's gospel, which is what we'll get this Sunday. And then for some odd reason, then we get the call of the first disciples in year C. So what's interesting is we're hearing the same things, maybe in a different order, but always focused on sort of the same things during the whole season of Epiphany. I just found that kind of fascinating when you looked at it. And there's Paul, 1 Corinthians, the whole way through. So the picture I just took down, that the healing of the man with the unclean spirit in the synagogue, only Mark and Luke have this story. Matthew does not. But all 3 of the synoptics have the story of Peter's mother-in-law being healed and how the town brought all those who were sick to Jesus at sundown. So I'm going to I found a picture for that, for both of those. So here is Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law.
You said that it was only in Mark and Matthew. There are demons that are exorcised in Luke, but just not that specific one. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about that. Not that same story of being in the synagogue and then healing the man with the unclean spirit.
Okay. Okay.
So what's interesting about this, and I have a theory here. So a lot of the pictures I looked at, there's people with Jesus, because the gospel story account tells us that Jesus went to the house of Peter, and we're assuming James and John and Peter and Andrew were with them. They went in. Peter's mother-in-law is sick. This woman looks almost too young to be Peter's mother-in-law. And most of the pictures I saw, she was definitely older. But then remember, later there's a story of Jesus resurrecting the little girl, Jairus' daughter, right?
Yes.
So I'm thinking that may be what this is, because Jesus clears everybody out of the room and then goes to her and resurrects her. But I don't know how this got thrown in with all the Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law pictures. I guess
somebody tagged the photo incorrectly. I think you're right. It does look like the resurrection of the young girl, of the dead girl.
The young woman, yeah.
Either that or Peter married someone who's like 6. I don't think that happened. 12. So here is, hang on. So in the gospel for 5 Epiphany coming up this week, in Mark's gospel, we're told that he heals Peter's mother-in-law, and then we're told he goes out into the street at sundown and heals all those who were brought to him. So I found this one. Of course, you don't get any sense that it's sundown here, but all 3 of the Gospels, the synoptics, indicate evening or sundown. There was one I saw which was actually kind of funny, because it had Jesus standing and then like in a field, and then just a line, literally a single file line going out as far as you could see to the edge of the picture. I'm like, yeah, it must have felt like that some days.
Like COVID vaccination line, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's at Dodger Stadium and there's a line wrapping around.
Just high-fiving people.
But in that picture, he was in a field, and in the gospel specifically in this story state, he went into the city. He was out at sundown in the city, and they come to him. Here they have some being carried, and you see all kinds of different affirmities.
This looks
And-
like the Great Walled City over there. Have you ever been in those corridors of the Great Walled City?
No,
That's what it reminds me of, the Great Walled City, because it's narrow and it's, you know, some high construction there.
I was reading when Jeff and when we did the lectionary study. I don't remember if I said this in that class or not about Capernaum, and when Jesus called Peter and Andrew and James and John, the synoptic version of that, how some archaeologists who had done some excavations in Capernaum found what looked to be ruins of houses that would have been set up in like a circle. So it would have been sort of their own little, let me turn me back on here.
Little cul-de-sac.
Yeah, their own little cul-de-sac type thing. And those fishermen would live in those houses because it was right by the sea. So when we go to Peter and Andrew's house, we're assuming that Peter and Andrew lived in the same house with their spouses or mothers or fathers or whatever it may be, and that other fishermen would have lived in the houses right around them. So here, this would be Capernaum, where they would go out into the city itself. Of course, I don't know enough about the history of it to know what if these are houses we're looking at, if these are stores,
or even how hard the artist was trying to depict something historically accurate.
Right.
Interesting.
But in this version, as we've seen in other art we've looked at, Jesus doesn't have the halo.
No. He did in the last one, though.
Yeah, he did. You're right.
Yeah, but not here.
And there's two people in slings there waiting to be blessed and
Yeah.
healed.
Who can't walk.
Yeah.
Of course, remember there's the story, I believe it's in Luke's gospel, where Jesus is in the house and they surround the house. And
Yeah.
one person is in the bag who can't get through the crowd and they lower him through the roof, remember?
Right.
I'm like, well, that sounds dangerous.
Yeah.
And then I had, whoops, I lost it here. Then I had this one. Another version of Jesus healing the masses. Again, it looks to be in the city.
It's easier to.
But a different look at what's probably the same, depicting the same scene.
A line of people.
Yeah, you see the line stretching out back here. People hanging by the tree.
Yeah.
People not sure what to make of it.
And Jesus doing it all by himself. No disciples around.
People with crutches.
Yeah, unless look at this person here. It's like, could they be disciples trying to help the line move along to say,
Yeah,
hang
maybe.
on, wait,
Yeah.
Could be.
Could be, yeah.
Or don't butt in.
I mean, Jesus hadn't given authority to the disciples yet to go out and do this on their own, which will come later. in the gospel narrative, and then they're sent out and they do this as well.
They're sort of like interns. They're watching the example, how to learn.
Yeah.
They didn't have disciple school to go to, so they learned by watching.
Yes.
I read that.
We still learn from each other today, don't we?
And the crutch here and a crutch here, carrying someone on their back. Yeah. Just interesting take, I thought, on that.
Yeah.
So the person in the distance behind Jesus looks like a woman in a bustled dress out of a different century.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
A time traveler interloping onto the scene.
Yeah.
Pushing a button for an elevator.
Mhm.
That funny temple.
Well, now, Jim, I'm going to have to blow it up and see if we can get a better look at that. It
In
still
the
looks
upper
like that.
right-hand-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, bustle in the back. Oh my. Goodness.
Yeah.
It's like,
That doesn't belong there.
Maybe that's the artist putting his wife and child into the painting. Or into
I
the picture.
wondered something like that, if that was.
really.
Yeah.
In the upper right-hand corner, you see a picture of temple on a hill.
This?
Temple on the hill.
There it is up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at that.
Is it
The Dome of the Rock.
Where?
dome?
I don't think we're looking.
There it is.
This thing here. Yeah. Or it could also be a person. It almost looks like a head and an arm.
In a doorway,
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, it's hard to tell from this.
Interesting.
And yeah, they don't even have faces back here. Well, they don't either.
The bustle, doesn't it? It's good.
It looks like there's a maker's mark down in the lower right-hand corner. When you
That's
Over
what I-
here,
keep going down farther.
That's what I thought too.
The artist.
Yeah. Cause
There.
right
There.
there.
Way
Yeah.
down at the bottom. Yeah.
yeah, could be. Well, anyhow, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Now I can plug my light back in.
Yeah.
There we go. That's a little better. So that was my take on Epiphany. So we get establishing authority. We get Acts of Apostles through baptism. We get the baptism of Jesus. Then we hear various things from John's Gospel. And then we have a series of the law and prophets, Moses and the prophets, Paul's teaching in Corinth, and Jesus, the various aspects of Jesus's ministry through teaching and healing and fulfilling the law. Very good themes for the setting. And remember, Epiphany is longer or shorter depending on where Easter falls. At its shortest, we get 5 Sundays in Epiphany. So we'll get the 4th Sunday after the Epiphany, and then we'll go immediately to last Epiphany. And then, and at the longest, we get 9 Sundays in Epiphany. We get the 8th Sunday after Epiphany, and then last Epiphany. And to get to 8 Epiphany is very rare when we hit it. It only happens like every 12
40 years.
years, yeah, or longer, yeah.
Wow.
I can only remember preaching on 8 Epiphany one time.
Well, so if we have 5 this year, does that mean next year we're going to have 6 Epiphanies?
No, it just depends on where Easter is, and I don't know where
Oh,
Easter is
okay.
next year right now. Well, I can tell you in just a minute. I do have a prayer book here.
Interesting.
So we actually have 6 Sundays in Epiphany this year because we go through 5 Epiphany, and then we'll get last Epiphany, right? So that'll be the 6th Sunday in Epiphany. Hi, Robin.
Hi.
So in the year 2022, Easter is April 17th. It's April 4th this year. It's April 17th.
Oh, we should have 8 or 9.
So we'll have
8 or 9, maybe 10.
we'll have 2 more Sundays in Epiphany. So we'll go through 7 and then last, right?
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, so there'll be 8 total. So we'll get 7. We'll go through 7 Epiphany, but not the elusive 8th Epiphany. unless it goes really late in April. So in the year 2038, Easter is April 25th, which is I think the latest it can happen.
Wow.
So that I guarantee we'll get the 8th Epiphany in that year.
Wow.
It'll be 90.
No, we won't. Well,
Party like it's 1999.
Don't look for me to be here in 2038. Woo.
oh,
And that'll be year A. So we'll get 8th Epiphany year
Whoa.
A.
It's good to look ahead.
And then remember the earliest April can be is what,
Me.
March 22nd
what's that early?
or 1st?
Oh my God.
March 21st is the earliest.
Wow.
No.
Woo.
No, March 22nd is the earliest it can be.
That's
Good.
Yep.
early.
It was back in 1818. That was the last time it happened.
Were you there,
Wow.
Jeff?
No, I only read about it in the paper.
And we've had it close. 2008, it was March 23rd.
Woo.
Doesn't he really?
But we won't hit it again. We won't hit March 22nd again, at least through the year 2089.
Woo. Well, I will be here. Woo.
2285.
Really?
Yep.
That's the next time?
That's the next time.
Wow.
Woo.
Well, tell us about it, Jeff.
Yeah.
1943, it was it landed on the 25th and will again in 2038.
Yep.
Woo.
And the closest we'll come to that earliest will be in,
I'll still be.
well, in 2024, it'll be March 31st. In 2027, it'll be March 28th.
I can remember some early Ash Wednesdays, but
It's-
none
Mhm.
quite that early. But I can remember some early ones.
It's very strange to me when Easter falls in March.
Yeah, that
It
seems
just
wrong.
seems out of order.
Yeah, yeah.
Or we got gypped on Epiphany somehow, you know?
Something about the churches doing Easter egg hunts in the snow kind of gets me excited.
That can happen in April.
Yeah,
That can
that's
happen
true.
I was telling lectionary group last night that I'm disappointed we don't get to do 6 Epiphany this year because I like the readings so much that we get. We're gonna have to wait another 3 years to get them.
Wow.
Well, you could cheat and none of us would know.
Well, that is true. I could. Today, I'm not preaching on anything we heard, but instead I'm going to go to what we would have heard if this had been 6 Epiphany.
That wouldn't be the first time you've done that, Andy.
Probably not.
No.
Well, that's all I had for today. So